Divorce happens. In fact, it happens to almost 50% of first marriages. So let's talk about it. Welcome to Divorce Happens, a podcast to educate, inspire, support, and yes, make you laugh through divorce and beyond so that you can start fresh on the next phase of your journey. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh.
You'll get divorced. You'll get divorced.
Getting divorced?
I'm getting a divorce.
You're getting a divorce.
Because she's getting a divorce.
So what if I get divorced?
Hello. Welcome back to Divorce Happens, the show where we support you before, during, and after divorce with education, inspiration, and a little bit of laughter because, as you know, divorce happens and then you start fresh. We're here with one of our amazing Fresh Starts experts for a very important podcast episode today. Lyerly, can you first introduce yourself?
Sure. It's always a pleasure to be here speaking with you, Olivia. My name is Lyerly Spongberg, and I am a certified ADR divorce coach, premediation coach, and a co-parenting specialist.
Okay, so I'm excited about this episode because one of the questions that we get a lot over here at Fresh Starts really pertains to like the I would say like the post consideration, but pre actually doing so much stuff divorce place, right? You have decided that you want to get divorced, but you don't really know the journey and you get started and you may fall into some traps. I feel like it's like watching The Princess Bride and you're falling into the swamp. So Lyerly is here to kind of help us prevent that. We're going to talk about those like pitfalls that could happen in that process. So Lyerly, first of all, why do you think so many people kind of fall into these pitfalls in the beginning of the divorce process?
Well, I think, there's so much time that goes into coming to this conclusion, right? There's so much inner work that's done. It could be years, right, before you make this decision. And once you've made it, you then have to think about actually doing it. And I think people get incredibly overwhelmed. This can happen even before they have the conversation. And what happens really is they get emotionally dysregulated. There's so many fears and concerns about what's going to happen to their reality, to where they live, to you name it, right? Their finances, their kids, they can't imagine not seeing their kids 24/7, but they have determined that they need to get out of this relationship for whatever reason that is. And often their brain goes into survival mode, which is where we are dysregulated and are really incapable neuroscientifically of making future focused decisions. And people, they don't get enough sleep, they don't eat well, they stop a lot of daily routines, and people just get, no other way to say it, completely overwhelmed by the process, the idea of it.
Yeah, there's no education, right? There's no education around it. So you really don't know. And I've even found it's hard to ask the people around you who've been through it because every divorce is so different. So you're kind of trapped.
You're trapped. And I think that first instinct, people will now go to ChatGPT and they'll ask, and sometimes, hey, it's a great resource in some ways. It can be just a rabbit hole that you don't want to go down in other ways too.
Yeah.
And then people often will ask friends. And that's sort of my pitfall number 2 is like, first, sort of reacting out of this emotional dysregulation and not knowing where to turn and not being able to think straight. And then sort of 2, which leads to asking a lot of people for advice. And people love to give advice, and they will tell you about, what their aunt got in a divorce or what their sister, and then you latch on, understandably, to thinking what it could be like for you.
Yep.
And, but they're all different. Every circumstance is different, financially, emotionally, the relationships within any marriage and children. So that can drive a really big problem, is thinking that you're entitled to something that someone else got. And your laws could be different in your state. So that's sort of pitfall number 2 is having that, listen to your hairdresser, whoever it is. And people think they're trying to help. But a lot of times they're really not helping. They're adding to your anxiety and your dysregulation. So that's sort of number 2, I think, is just thinking that what happened to someone else is gonna work for you, and that is not. And sometimes that means hiring a big attorney, the toughest person you can find first. That's often not the right first move. I'm sure you've heard that before, right?
Yeah.
People think, or do I need to call 10 attorneys? in my district, so
Right.
my spouse can't hire them. So a lot of mistakes get made in that dysregulation phase, and let me listen to what everybody else did and let me
Yeah.
try that.
Yeah, it's that kind of dangerous intersection there. So, okay, so take us back to the beginning. Let's go through these pitfalls one by one. So, what is the first pitfall, which you mentioned a little bit, but let's really dig into it. Why is this a pitfall? What makes it a pitfall? And how can we prevent this from happening?
Well, the dysregulation one is understanding what's going on, talking to someone who can help you address your fears. So a coach is a great place to start for that. Sometimes it's an attorney and sometimes but getting information about what it is that you're about to go through so that you can alleviate some of those fears and you can calm some of your nervous system. I'm a huge proponent of exercising and self-care during this process because it's like putting your oxygen mask on first. You have to take care of yourself before you can tackle any of these big things. So that's how you can prevent that, and reaching out to the right people in terms of the advice part. It's very important to reach out to people that you trust. It's also really okay to say, I really appreciate your concern. What I need from you right now is a walk and a glass of wine,
Mm,
not hearing about your divorce story. So
yeah.
those boundaries I think are important for people to establish.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, so what are some of the other pitfalls here that you've seen people fall into?
Well, the big one we wanted to talk about today, which is sort of the culmination of these first two, is that you're dysregulated, you start asking all these different people, you might make a knee-jerk decision based on the fact that you're dysregulated. You might hire some big bad attorney. And you're probably going to get really stuck on the concept of fair, which is a four-letter divorce word. And that can come from it, it encompasses all parts of divorce. It let's see, it sort of attacks your value system. So in divorce, that can look like co-parenting, like thinking I've been the primary caregiver for the entirety of this marriage. So how could it possibly be fair that my co-parent is going to have my kids 40-50% of the time? That doesn't seem
Right.
fair.
Right.
But we have to think of that from a child's perspective, right? Um, and that can also be, we decided I was going to be a stay-at-home mom for all these years. And now what? I have to go back to work. That's not fair. Uh, so fair is this very, very subjective idea that comes up. And I'm sure in talking to a lot of people in your
Yeah,
consult, right? Hey, it doesn't seem fair that he has done this or she has done this or she even wants.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And there's always a feeling of like justice, right? Like, well, I have to like get justice for this, right? Like I raised the kids and so I deserve to have whatever, I was with that person when they made their money and so like and that was I think a lot of it for me. It was like this sense of like almost like a comic book superhero. Like, no, this isn't fair. I have to save the day, right? Like
Right.
and it
Right.
it does get to your value system and it brings up, I think, so many emotions, right? Like
Mm.
anger and jealousy and revenge and all of these things. So, yeah, I think, but I have yet to see people go through divorce that haven't used that four-letter F word, right?
Of course not, because
Yeah,
you're now going to take this, this one home and divide it into two different homes. And what does that look like? And we talked before about the difference between a position and an interest, right? And a lot of times people get stuck on what they want instead of why they want it. And that is another piece of fair. And as a divorce coach, we really work on, okay, this is all these decisions need to be made. And a lot of them aren't going to seem quote unquote fair to you. But let's talk about what's good enough. Let's talk about what you really need. And let's try to reframe what a equitable distribution looks like and not make it a fair distribution. But what do I need?
right.
How do I negotiate this? Because let's face it, it's not going to feel fair in a lot of ways.
No, none of it feels fair, right? Not,
And
I
not to
mean,
them either. That's the other
right.
piece of, you have this perception that they're getting more or and so it is so subjective that no one I think I've ever spoken to who's gone through divorce believes that they got a fair deal and how it all worked out.
No, and even if you believe it, somebody's going to tell you that it's not true, right? Somebody else in your life, will say, no, I don't think you really did get a fair deal. So
Yeah.
there's always somebody else saying that. But I guess my question for you, Lyerly, is having gone through this, and I talked to so many people who come to me at that moment, as you do too, and they're so jacked up emotionally, right? Like their nervous systems are like you can feel it through the screen. Like, oh my gosh, they need to just breathe.
Mhm.
When you're in that panic mode, it is so impossible, literally, to make any good decisions, right? Any confident decisions.
Mhm.
And I even think that I definitely remember like yelling at the people that were trying to help me, right? Like, well, this isn't fair and this isn't, because you're just in almost like an animal like defense mode,
Yeah,
right?
your brain is in
Right.
survival mode,
Right.
for
So
sure.
how do we like come back from this to not screw up, our divorce process by acting out from these moments?
I think that's the key to getting through this successfully, right? Is to recognize your emotional dysregulation. So, and a lot of times you have to name it to tame it. So you have to say, you know what? It's not that I'm just angry. It's not that I'm frustrated. I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling, we have to expand our vocabulary around the emotions that we're feeling. And we have to feel them. We have to feel angry. We have to feel frustrated. We have to feel disappointed. We have to feel sad and grieve this death of what this dream was, this marriage was. And once we can start to do that with a client, if we can help someone get there, then we can talk about, okay, let's think about what you want on the other side of this.
Right.
I mean, of course it's a component of it, but say there's betrayal or someone has been controlling or this is high conflict. Yes, that is going to be a piece of this. But what do you want when this is over for you? And let's talk about what that looks like, and that can help someone get out of the concept of getting what's fair.
Hmm.
I find, like, focus on the bigger picture. Who do you want to be when this is over?
So, how can a divorce coach like you work with somebody kind of from the beginning of this process to help them sidestep, right, some of these pitfalls that they might fall into?
Well, I think we talked about in the beginning what that emotional regulation looks like, and it's a lot of questions, right? Like, so when have you felt your best? When you have conquered something really difficult in the past, how did you get through that? What did you tap into within yourself? What habits did was it eating healthy? Was it exercising every day? I know when I went through my divorce, I started running marathons, and that was
Mm,
my absolute therapy. It saved me in so many ways. And that's not uncommon, sort of diving into exercise. So what
mhm,
is that works for you? Is there a friend that you count on? Is there someone you have dinner with on a
right.
weekly basis? So that's sort of the emotional dysregulation piece, how to address that. In terms of asking everyone for advice, you just got to stop doing it. I mean,
Mm,
I think hopefully I like to help clients build a team so that they have real experts that they know that they can get answers from.
mhm,
And again, like I said before, put up some of those boundaries with your aunt
yeah,
that adores you that wants to be there, but just continually makes you actually more stressed out.
yeah, yeah,
So that's part of it. And then fair, you have to, I think, reframe it, like I said before.
yeah. So, what do you do with clients, Lyerly, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, "Oh, I needed this support"? Talk to us a little bit about the work that you do with the people that you support.
Well, it depends sort of, I think, when they come to me. Sometimes they're coming at the very, very beginning, and the biggest fear they have is how they're going to have this conversation. So that can be one of the things that we start with, and that could be a script, that could be reality testing what reactions would be. We talk about safety and where you want to have that conversation. That's a piece of it. I
Mhm,
find with a lot of my women clients that their biggest fear is around co-parenting. So a lot of times it's getting your head around them not being a mom 24/7, and that is a huge identity crisis for someone who is that's really they define themselves as moms. So we have to work on, well, you know what, you're still 100% mom even if you're not with your kids 50% of the time. And
yeah,
and there's a lot of work to do there in terms of sort of um again that reframe, what does that look like? And I think a lot of divorced moms will find that after there's the dust settles and this pattern develops and it gets more comfortable, sharing time with your kids, that some of those days are pretty nice by yourself. And that's really hard to imagine
yeah,
when you're in the middle of it. But again, it's that what can I do? Who do I want to be, on the other side of this? Do I want to be a person who, what am I modeling for my children if there are children involved? So
right.
it's a lot of that work around just asking a lot of questions about
Mhm,
looking at it from different perspectives.
yeah, because that's what a good coach does, right? They really just ask questions to inform you of the things that you're kind of feeling and thinking. And I know you help people in all stages of the divorce and the
Mhm.
process and all of those good things. Um, so if somebody is listening to this and they feel very like trapped in this moment of like, I feel like I'm going to fall into these pitfalls because I don't know where to begin and what to do, and I feel very dysregulated. What would
Mhm.
be something that they could just start doing on their own to ground themselves during this time?
Well, like I said before, I think what have you done? What has worked for you in the past? Because I think a lot of times it's important to go back to that. So if someone, because like I said before, sometimes you get so dysregulated, you stop doing the things that have made you feel good. So
Mhm.
what is one thing you could do? Did you journal? That's a great thing to do to help you process some of these things. Can you get out and exercise regularly? Those I would say the first two. There's very simple breathing techniques if you're trying to really calm yourself down. Bring
Yeah.
yourself back into the present. So I think, name 10 things. There are
Mhm.
very small tools you can use that can help you bring you back into the moment. And then, furthering that, like how do you start regulating all this is to get very focused on I think naming your biggest concerns and fears
Mm.
and then finding someone to talk to about that. And it can
Mhm.
be, I'm not going to have enough money. Okay. So maybe you want to speak to, a certified
Mm.
CFA first, if that's your biggest fear.
Right.
Or it's I really don't know the legal questions around
Right.
something and have a consult with an attorney. And if I just have nowhere to start, I also always think a divorce coach is a great
Yeah.
place to start because they kind of pull all the pieces
Yep.
together.
Yeah, I agree with that. We always send people over to the divorce coach first. Um, so if somebody's listening to this and they're kind of in the middle of the process, I always, I ask this all the time, but what would be some encouraging words that you could leave with them today if they're kind of at this intersection and trying to put one foot in front of another?
Well, baby steps are very important and trying to tackle one thing every day. If you're and maybe that's coming up with the courage to name what a fear is. Maybe that is, sometimes it's okay to do nothing. That's okay too. Like I didn't check anything on pilot. Forgive yourself for that. Um, and figuring out how to incorporate that self care. I think that is something that is really, really critical at the beginning if you're kind of spiraling.
Yeah. Yep. Totally. Your advice is gold. Thank you so much, Lyerly. We appreciate you.
Thank you for
We
having
will
me.
have you come back again, as always, to teach us more wisdom. If you'd like to work with Lyerly, of course, her link is in the show notes, and you can head over to Fresh Starts and find her in the expert guide and go follow her on Instagram because she's always giving away some great advice and educational support over there. Thank you so much, Lyerly.
Thank you, Olivia. And I hope that helps people avoid some of the very common pitfalls at the beginning of this divorce process.
Divorce Happens is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the only divorce registry platform for everything you need to begin again, including home items, hype team, and everything in between. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh. We're here to support you before, during, and after divorce. Head to freshstartsregistry.com for more info.